All right. So when I put this presentation together, I did so because we talk a lot about the older architecture in Glens Falls and Queensbury, um, the beautiful 19th century and early 20th century architecture, which is of course very stately and ornate and classic. But I feel like the more modern and contemporary architecture kind of gets lost in that. And when you think about it, it's as much a part of our history as the older homes and buildings, and as just as important too. I don't know if it's the years that have gone by, the time difference, or just the styles that people don't care for. But I'm hoping that maybe you might see things a little bit differently after we go through this. And it's sort of equal parts history, illustrated by the architecture. And one other thing I'll say is that obviously not everything is included in here. I'm sure I've left things out. They've just been things that have stuck out to me and that I've been able to find information on. So let's get going. Sorry. So we start at the end of World War II. The 1950s are a period of exuberance and relief that the war has come to an end. There's this overwhelming sense of hopefulness and optimism, combined with pride and confidence. We're eager to move on and focus on our futures. So as you can see here, there's a lot of changes that are going to be taking place very shortly. These are probably four of the main factors that are going to drive that push, including housing demands as people return from the service. Cars are a big influence. An increase in highway building, in particular in our area, I-87, or the Northway as it's commonly referred to, and movement from urban centers and downtown areas to shopping plazas. During World War II, FDR signed his GI Bill, which was meant to hopefully avoid going back into depression after the war ended. So he's offering the veterans some excellent benefits, and that will be a big influence on our economy and how things proceed. And what's happening in a national arena plays out very directly and it almost mirrors what's going on here in Queensbury, Lake George, Glens Falls. But probably the biggest factor is going to be the home interest, the low interest homes that are available for the vets. So I just included some things to give you the idea of what's ahead. So as you can see, in just a decade's time, the population of Queensbury really explodes. And what happens is nationwide, there's a drive from the urban areas as people need housing, there's a need for land, which Queensbury has. So as people come back, they look to Queensbury, which is mostly farmland at that time. And where there's land, they can build homes. And we start to get the first major developments in Queensbury. And in particular, that's Cottage Hill Road. That is the first fully developed subdivision. These are national homes. And for the first time, really, they came almost like, it's like a template. You had a bunch of designs you could choose from, and you picked what you wanted. They're very simple, but they have everything that you need. They're functional. And for the first time, part of the American dream is a reality for people. It's achievable with those GI bills um, that they can own their own home and start new and building families. So, and the design of these homes is going to be very much a part of the modern, mid-century modern architecture. Just very simple, clean lines, not a lot of ornaments, and functional. And here's the plans for Cottage Hill. As you can see there, it also includes Prospect Drive. And you see its relation to Dixon Road. And here we have an aerial view, which came out of the History of the Queensbury Schools book, with Aviation Road being oriented at the left. And at the top, that's going to be where the Northway will go through. That's pointing east. And then on the left side, you would have Dixon Road. And what's really interesting about the picture is that it just shows the pine plains. It's so open. This was part of Miller's Hill, that area. And as you can see, there's a lot of room for expansion. And here are a couple of newspaper ads at that time. One for Cottage Hill, which, as you can see, they're marketing towards the veterans and advertising what the monthly payments would be. And then on the right, they're showing some of the basic floor plans that you can choose from. And it's funny because when I was about in kindergarten, that was where I lived. I lived in one of those homes. So it's actually kind of familiar. And here are just a couple samples of those Cottage Hill houses. So they're all, very simple designs, very similar to one another, but still leave room for personalization. Here's a couple on Prospect. Nothing fancy, but it was your gateway into home ownership. And then I included this picture of the marker because this is a recent development put up that recognizes the importance of this location. One of the other developments that's around at that time is Greenway North. That's just across from where the Aviation Mall is today. Again, the same concept. They would have been, had plans to choose from. And this particular home I thought was pretty interesting because it has that asymmetrical roof line and a single gable there. And that's going to kind of foretell some of the other designs that you'll see. A few more from Greenway North and Greenway Road, including that one on the right with that really interesting sloped roof. That's starting to feel more of what people typically think of mid-century modern architecture as. And I tried to go chronologically through these slides, but I included this one, which is sort of out of place, Glendale Furniture, which is now Mohan's. And I included it because Glendale Furniture actually supplied the furniture for the model homes in Cottage Hill. And you would have gone there for your Barca lounger. This is, again, a typical design for that time period. Although the windows would have been probably almost to the ground there. And I do believe that this has been redone, within the relative recent past. And it would have been the showcase room. One of the characteristics of mid-century modern are these big plate glass windows, very large, letting light in, letting people see in. And then of course the roof line there.
Amazing.
Another aspect that's going to play out as a big part of the 50s and 60s and onwards is the population growth in the schools. You have the baby boomers, you have the families are just growing, people are moving into the area, uh, by the droves, basically. And around this same time, the Queensbury schools, which had formerly been all small rural schools spread out, were asked by the state, or actually told by the state, that they needed to consolidate. And the people of Queensbury were given two options. Either your school can consolidate with Lake George if you were north of the farm to market road, or if you were south, you would consolidate with Glens Falls. And the people kind of got up in arms about that. They didn't really like that idea. They thought that they would, kind of lose their identity, and made the decision, much to the surprise, I think, of people at that time, that they were going to form their own school. So Union District number 2 is formed, and the Floyd Bennett Airfield is chosen as the school site. It was no longer in use at that time, since Warren County Airport had been built. And a local architect by the name of Milton Lee Crandall is hired to do that design. So here's the building. And as you can see, again, there is just nothing around in this area. It is wide open, which is part of its appeal, why this site was chosen. Another reason why this site is chosen, because of the options of expansion later, which is what happened. It became necessary to add on to this building and then build more buildings. And the 1950s are really the era of dining out. That's where restaurants and fast food places pop up. People have more disposable income, more time, more leisure time, and they want to spend time with their families. So they end up going out a lot more, and casual dining experience becomes very popular. So here we have Martha's Ice Cream, which obviously, well, I won't say obviously, it was a restaurant prior, and they also then added ice cream. I'm not exactly sure when this photo dates to. I'm assuming in the early 1950s, maybe a little bit later, but this is the iconic ice cream stand that you think of for the time period. And they all tended to have that sloped roof, where the side that was closer to the highway was going to be higher than the back. And then those giant windows, so you could order, so you could see in, as well as that great neon sign on the top. You end up seeing those all over. And of course, Howard Johnson's. This location was built in 1953, and it was built, it was actually opened by Carl DeSantis, who ended up owning a lot of restaurants in the area. He was interested in opening a Howard Johnson's, and he went to his father and asked him if he could actually have a parcel of their property. This actually adjoined a small motor court that his parents had owned, and they gave him the property. They also floated a loan for $2,500 to get him started. He went to well, he did training with the Howard Johnson's company, and then opened his own restaurant. And here you see the iconic orange roof and the blue cupola. That design is instrumented in, I believe, about 1948 by an architect in Miami. And Howard Johnson's was really smart. It's one of the first franchises that you'll see. And this architect basically said, you need to come up with ideas that are going to be consistent, across your franchise. And this is what he chose. So here we have opening in 1935 was the first one, and there's his name I couldn't quite remember, Rufus Nims. And it was 1948. So, and this shot is current today. It does look like maybe they updated the front design, they closed it off, but originally it had all of those windows. And there you got your great classic car. We're gonna look at a lot more fast food and drive-in restaurants. Yeah, I think you see a lot of the classic mid-century architecture in commercial buildings and in particular restaurants. So here's the A&W drive-in. When I say car was king, now people are starting to drive in to these restaurants. There's car side service. A&W actually started out in California, and by 1923, they were offering car side service, but they called the car hops tray boys. And I think within 10 years' time, they had gone to 170 different locations and then just kept growing from there. And I think by the 1960s, they had over 6,000. And fortunately, this one's still open and still has the car hops. And here's a slightly older picture. This building did catch on fire in 2013. The interior was pretty much gutted, but the exterior, the structure itself remained the same, although they did update with different siding. So the awning changed color and the backdrop changed color. This is 1959, and I think in 1958, the one in South Glens Falls opened. And then to the left there, you've got a little image of one of their tray people. So also at this time, you've got shopping centers. This is the first shopping center to be built. This was built on land owned by John Miller. You've heard of Miller's Hill, I'm sure, but it was farmland that had been in his family since 1846. And he leased it for this plaza. The anchor store is the Montgomery Ward, or I'm sorry, Sears Roebuck. Sears Roebuck moved from their Glens Falls location to the center so that they could have more room to expand, as well as there's an A&P store. So here's a picture of that. It's done in the colonial style. Terrific neon sign, which was common for that time, especially built on those large pylons. There's also a Dawes Drugs. And one thing that I noticed in this picture that I thought was really cool was the drive-up phone. I mean, again, you talk about doing everything with your car, even making phone calls. And there is actually a drive-up phone still up by Dunham's Bay, by the resort there. And when people moved away from cities and they were, they're driving their cars everywhere, they need parking. So that's one of the other reasons why these shopping plazas became very prevalent. And this style it's called brutalist architecture, and I wanted to show this just as a comparison. It's Boston City Hall, and this is a style of architecture that is included in mid-century modern. It came over from Britain. It was associated with utilitarianism, government buildings, institutions, a lot of concrete, glass, brick. A lot of people don't like these designs, which I can understand why. And eventually here in America, they fell out of favor in the 70s because people associated them with totalitarianism, and they're just rather cold and impersonal. However, we do see some of that influence here in the municipal center. This again was a Milton Crandall design, and you see the rows of windows. Most mid-century buildings tend to be one story. This part of this is two. And off on the left there, you would have a recessed entrance. Those were popular. A lot of use of brick, and I believe that is Vermont white marble, as well as the metal grating. So a very simple design. It was meant to, I guess, improve productivity and efficiency within for the workers, which may be another reason why you tend to see in government buildings. I don't know if it was really that effective, but that was the idea behind it. So this is just a postcard view. And in the lower picture there, you can see the concrete columns with the recessed entrance. And then on the top, that's where that metal grating is. Sorry, I don't have a better picture. It's a little bit harder for me to get around in the winter to take pictures. Meanwhile, the population growth within the school is just bursting. And there's just not enough space, even in the new school, to accommodate all the students that are coming in. And as you can see there on that chart, even by 1957, they're already at capacity. And the school system asked the townspeople for 8 additional elementary rooms, and then decides that really the construction of a new building is probably the best thing. By this time, they've already made 2 additions to that first building, I believe. So, and then you have the high school completion in 1963. This again was a Milton Crandall design.
It's genius.
In 1961, Quaker Road opened. So you're starting to get businesses spreading out on that available land. And this is one that popped up. This is the lighting studio, 1963. That architecture has been changed quite a bit. But you've got that use of the mosaic stone facade. And I included it because of this feature. I remember this. I've remembered this for a long time. This lantern. I don't believe it's original. I think the original just did not have those blue panes, and it did originally say the lighting studio. It now says Country Club Road, but that base, I couldn't figure out exactly when that was updated. But in the ad on the left, which came from the Glens Falls directory, you can see in that picture right up on top, that lamp, and then the neon sign that stood out more towards the road. And that lamp post was really, I guess, they said, stop by at the sign of the lamp post. And then just to the northeast corner of the intersection between Quaker and Route 9, the Northway Plaza was put in. And it is here that Montgomery Ward was the anchor store. They also moved from Glens Falls into this plaza for more space, and obviously a lot more parking is much easier. And here are a few artist renditions of that. And then just here's a postcard version of in 1982, which just doesn't look anything like that now, really. So one of the styles of architecture that's included in mid-century modern is called Googie architecture. I always thought it was Googie, but I guess it's Googie. So it's all about futuristic design, and people are influenced by the space themes. You're going to see a lot of curves and geometric shapes. Use of materials like the neon, the steel, the plastic, and their designs are supposed to evoke movement. And unfortunately, this one is no longer standing, but I'll bet there are some people who are familiar with this. It's a terrific A-frame front with the ground to ceiling glass panels. This was the Imperial Restaurant. It's got aluminum striped shingles on it. Very low, sleek, asymmetrical design. I believe this was opened by the Rogie brothers, who also owned the Imperial Arms Motor Court next door. and it was kind of aimed towards businessmen. And here's their ad. This is where I feel like it starts to get funky.
Getting funky.
So another thing that's going on is the introduction of Tiki culture. And again, this, just like a lot of the architecture, it starts in California and makes its way east. Tiki culture was brought to the area, to California, by returning soldiers who had been served time in the South Pacific and came back. They would have recognized this, and it was just meant to be fun. So Charlie Wood, having just built the Storytown USA and Gaslight Village a few years earlier, designed and had the Tiki built. He was trying to bring tourists into the Lake George area, as well as to his own establishment. But he figured that with the Northway, being completed or near being completed, it was going to be a big boom to business, and he wanted to be in on it. And when I read about this, he was incredibly concerned about authenticity.
Really?
So he did a lot of research, and this is one of, I believe this is the last place where you can actually still catch a Polynesian dinner show in the US. And there are people who will travel from all over the country and even parts of the other countries just to see that. So when I think of some of these buildings, they're very special, and maybe that's why people should recognize them more. There's an older picture of the Tiki when it was first built, as well as one of the sculptures that are on the grounds today. Charlie went so far as to hire artists from Hawaii, Miami, and Saratoga, wherever he thought the artists could provide complementary decor, paintings, sculptures, etc. This was by a Miami artist, Van de Kar.
It's a slab.
And then there's an interior. So this is the era of Hurricane Hattie and Kaina. And he really spared no expense. He brought people here to perform from Hawaii. He actually had a catamaran imported, which he found on a trip to Tahiti. I am not sure where that is at this point. I would actually like to go take a look this summer, and just for comparison, this is a postcard of Clifton's in Los Angeles, where the Tiki culture was even bigger. It's sort of making a comeback. There's a lot of interest in Tiki culture at the moment. And fast food, of course, not necessarily drive-in, but franchises and chain restaurants are taking hold during the 1950s and 1960s. Of course, McDonald's started in 1954 with Ray Kroc, and one of his earlier designs is off on the right, and you've got the arches built out of plastic. That's a pretty new design element. And Speedy. And here is the one that we had originally on Route 9, again with those plastic arches, big glass front. You see that sloped roof, that idea of that dynamic look with all the different elements to it. You would actually go inside here to place your order. And this ad came from the one of the Queensbury yearbooks. Again, out on Quaker Road, you have Bob Clark's Auto, that giant glass front so you could view all the cars, the single gabled roof that slopes, and on the On the right there, you've got an ad, and that's now Hewitt's garden store. So some of these haven't changed a whole lot, which is great. I think one of the last ones to plazas to be built during the 1960s and 70s was Northgate Plaza. Single story design with the roof. There's your classic corrugated plastic Northgate Center sign, and I do think that that's original, although I couldn't find any photos to confirm it. And again, the interesting roof line that overhangs it. You see Radio Shack in the background there. No longer. And here we have the Howard Johnson's that was built just off exit 19. The Northway was completed up through Lake George as of 1966. And Charlie Wood and Carl DeSantis worked together. Charlie Wood owned the land here. Carl DeSantis leased part of the property to open another Howard Johnson's. This was, I believe, his third in this area, which included the one in South Glens Falls by the Landmark Motel, and obviously the one in Lake George. And Charlie Wood built the Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge next door. It was one of the largest complexes of its design for that time period. And the real draw of the lodge was that it had dial direct phones in every room. I guess that was the first in New York State for that. Oh, hang on. Oh, I want to go back. Sorry. Well, it's not letting me. Sorry about that. I did have a picture of the interior of the Howard Johnson's, but sorry. So we will move on to the Thunderbird Motor Inn. This is on Route 9 heading towards Bolton. And this is a really interesting design. This I would definitely call Googie. You have the round office building. Round structures kind of come into play when you're talking about drive-ins, so that there's more space for everyone to pull in. And I think that's kind of reflected in the motel design here. You got that great folded or zigzag roof, the big windows, and then that really neat neon and plastic sign out front. I think that this dates to about the mid 1960s, but I wasn't able to find out for sure. This is a little bit later, but it also it still has the Thunderbird Motor Inn sign. It's been repainted, but I love that roof line. These are really neat. And that is a contemporary view of the motel office. And then on the left there is just an example that I found online of other such designs. And the Glens Falls National Bank. This is a Milton Crandall Associates design. Makes for a very easy drive-through. Again, round with the zigzag roof line. You don't see too many of these much anymore. And Lake George and Queensbury still have quite a few, which I think makes us pretty lucky.
Yeah, I'll say.
Here's the architect's rendition of that design. I think it's pretty interesting that a bank would go for something like this too. It's not the usual institutional corporate style that I associate with banks. But then again, you have, here is what you normally would see. Very, very institutional. And today it looks like this. but they did change the design to accommodate the drive-through windows. And then I included these because I noticed as I was walking around that great folded roof design off on the left there. This is in Lake George on the corner of Canada and Beach Streets. Unfortunately, a lot of the front is covered with that big billboard type sign. I cannot remember what this was originally, so I didn't have, I wasn't successful finding out any information. If anyone knows what it was, if they could let me know, because I'm really curious. And the picture on the right is the interior. So that's what it would look like inside. I do know that on that corner there was one of the oldest miniature golf courses in the country for quite a while, as well as Mike's Submarines. So in 1967, Adirondack Community College moves from Hudson Falls to this Queensbury campus. Once again, the availability of space to grow. And this is a Milton Crandall design. This again is more institutional, more educational building, very common design for universities. And this is what it looks like today. I think the only real change is that they've added that, I think it's a cover. They covered the courtyard and they took out the checkered tiles that were on the ground there. And this is their gymnasium. That has not changed. And then I just put some examples of what those columns are doing. Those are vaults, and they did manage to actually kind of give them a mid-century flair, I think. And those are they would support the weight of that roof. And this has got to be one of my favorite pieces of mid-century architecture in the area. And that is Mr. B's, which originally was a Neba's roast beef when it was built. The man who started Mike's Submarines was a man by the name of Mike Davis, and he was from Lynn, Massachusetts. When he was I think he was 34, he came to Albany and he opened his first Mike Subs. Within just a few years, he had 4 other locations in the Troy, Schenectady, Albany area. And he would eventually open Neba's roast beef. In Lake George was his very first Neba's roast beef. And he franchised, he actually took this design and his franchise national, and they are all of similar design. I think at one time, the V structure there, which lights up at night, I think it was yellow, but it's got these great piercing geometric forms. And then here are 2 examples of other locations, including one in Missouri. He's sort of a rags to riches story, if anyone is familiar or not familiar with him. He started with nothing. He said he had so little money when he opened that first store in Albany that he would have to take the cash up front and then run out the back to buy ham or whatever he needed for the sandwiches and then run back in to make the sandwich. But by the time he kind of retired, he had one of the largest life insurance policies that had ever been, had ever been approved. He was a multimillionaire, and he moved down to Hollywood, Florida, and opened several Florida locations. And just here's a view at night, which I think is just awesome. I don't know if any of the original designs still exist down in Albany. I'd love to know. I'll have to go hunting. The pink roof, ice cream shop. It's got the jutting, the projecting roof line, very angular, and this would help shade people. This was associated with the miniature golf course, the Around the World miniature golf course that's adjoining it. I think they're all owned together. The other building has that same roof line. There again is that tilted ice cream cone neon sign. There are a few other examples of that same type of design. The right one is Pans in Los Angeles. And then, of course, Radio Shack that came in 1970. Unfortunately, that is gone, but the building is still there, part of Northgate. Then around the 1970s, the design for ice cream stands changed and became more barn-like. I think around 1970, well, 1970 to 1975, a lot of the ice cream and other stores, they wanted to be more like Americana, more rustic. They kind of went back to that. And there's the Amber Lantern. When I looked at accounts of the tourism industry in Lake George, from one year to the next in the 1950s, the numbers of people would just double. It was amazing. And a lot of the lakeside private estates got turned into motor courts or lodges or cabin courts. And here we have the A-frame design that became very popular. This was real simple. You could order it over by mail, and it was easy to put up. You could be creative with it. Other designs that are similar were the IHOP. And then this little building is right across from the Great Escape. I don't know what that was originally either, but it has that same design. Gift World, which was built in 1972. I believe it was just a year or two after Goonie Golf opened there. And it's got that great gambrel roof. Again, similar to the barn style, only from on the side opening. First National Bank of Glens Falls. And Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut was, you know, it has that iconic red roof. The businessmen who owned it were actually, this originated in Wichita, Kansas. Two brothers opened their first Pizza Hut. The saying was that the sign that they had to choose from only had room for 8 letters, and they knew that pizza had to be one of the words that they were going to use, so they went through a whole series of possibilities for the second word, and they ended up going with hut because the building that they had they were first in looked like a hut, and that fit and that stuck. It's got the trapezoidal windows still in the front. I think there was an addition that you're seeing by the entrance there that was not there originally. There would have been more of those trapezoidal windows. And this is now closed. It's the building's for sale. And Pizza Hut is now actually going back to their original designs. This red roof design designated dine-in locations. And the similarities, the consistency when you get chain restaurants, it lets people know they look for that. They'll look for the orange roof for Howard Johnson's, they'll look for the red roof for Pizza Hut. It was a way for people to be traveling and then just be able to distinguish very quickly, this is where we want to pull over. And I ended on this one because we're losing a lot of this period architecture in the area. We're losing it very quickly. This is one of them that I'm not sure if it's going to end up staying. I don't know if the whoever buys it is going to keep that design, but we end up losing a lot. So it's important to document them and appreciate them and hang on to them if we can.